David Brewster here with a new episode of Scales and Tales, and this is the Fretboard Dexterity Workout. And anytime you hear a musician or educator talking about improving or building your dexterity, or improving your finger independence, hand-eye coordination, agility, ability, speed, and things like that, they're basically talking about your technique or your performance technique on the guitar. And depending on who you are and the style of music that you prefer or play, for instance, if you're a blues guitarist, maybe you haven't really worked on your technique that much as far as picking and synchronizing your hands together, scale sequencing and arpeggios and stuff like that. But if you're a metalhead or a shredder, that might be all that you practice, is your technique and ability playing some of those things. So it kind of depends on who you are, but I can't really promise very much, on this channel, but I can reassure you, I promise, if you work on this material the way it's presented in this episode, and just slowly refine your performance ability and your, hand-eye coordination and everything, the results you're looking for will come. I mean, it might take a few weeks or a couple months or maybe even a year, but eventually, through that dedicated and very focused practice, the improvement in the areas you're looking for will come. Whether that's speed or just the kind of connection with the string, maybe the strength of your hand, maybe your hands feel a little weak or not very connected. Working on this stuff is going to definitely boost everything in your playing. So here we go. So to begin this lesson in the right place and to make sure everybody watching this is on the same page, I'm going to share an image with the Oxford Dictionary definition of the word dexterity, because that word gets thrown around a lot, especially in guitar circles. But then down below the definition, you're going to see some other words that I included, and those words are directly related or associated with dexterity. And everything on this image, I'm almost certain, every guitarist watching this video wants to improve all of these areas of their playing. But it all comes from dexterity. So this entire lesson or workout is going to revolve around the key of D major, and we're going to use the D major scale, or D Ionian as the modal name. And major scales are very common, so it's going to be up to you to move this into other keys and other positions on the fretboard. You could also shift it into other scale tonalities or modal flavors. But we're going to basically target this D major scale or Ionian right here. And it's 3 notes per string. And definitely, if you've ever worked through any of Paul Gilbert or John Petrucci, maybe Vinnie Moore and some players like that, if you ever worked through some of their educational material, they use these 3 note per string scale shapes a lot, so they're very common. And we're going to play it right here. There's D Ionian or D major, and there's D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and that's the 7 notes we need. It's a really good fingering to practice, because there you've got this whole step shape on the first 2 strings, and then a half step whole step shape on the next 2, and then a whole step half step shape on the next 2. So you actually get to use all of your fret hand fingers, and you're also exploring and practicing 3 of the most common fret hand fingerings on the guitar: the whole step, half step, whole step, and whole step, half step. But here's an image sharing a fretboard diagram showing you the scale, just in case you don't know where that scale is. That way you can practice this 3 note per string D Ionian. So here it is. Okay, next up, and this is very important, but I want to make sure everybody working with this lesson is playing the scale the right way, because you want to synchronize your hands together. You want to fret and pick at exactly, precisely the same time. You don't want to fret or pick a little late or a little early. You want to sync everything up. So we're going to play through the scale like this. Right? And go really slow, but fret and then pick, and synchronize it together like that. And that's picking every single note. You could also do legato on each string. And just pick the first note as you change strings. You could also do like a half and half, which I'm a big fan of. But the important thing here is you're not making any mistakes. There aren't any flubbed notes or muted notes or buzzy notes or just notes that aren't really sounding. You can hear every single note of that scale, and it's all even, right? And you're synchronized, both hands working together. And clean too, make sure it's really clean. Just a reminder, but this is a workout, a technique boosting workout. So don't shred this stuff. You know, the shredding and the speed and stuff will come later. But this first idea, it's a rolling 4-note sequence, and it's really common actually. But we're going to basically attack this D major scale like this. And there you can see we're basically playing 4 notes of that D major scale. And then I go back down 2, right? And then I go up 6 of that scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's kind of the pattern right there. And then we're going to do that all the way through that scale. So there's the first 2 strings. Start right there and do it again on the next, set of strings. And start it again right there. And then right there I actually move over to the B string with my middle finger, which is kind of funky. And move up like that, and then the final set right there. So that's ascending, right? That rolling 4-note pattern. I'm also grabbing that low D right there on the 10th fret on the high E string instead of reaching over and grabbing the D there. Just my own kind of version of ending it. And then right there you can start at the top and then descend your way down like this. Right there, I think I picked everything on the way up and then I did half and half on the way down. So you can definitely variate, and I would suggest all variations. Pick everything, legato everything, and then half and half everything and see what happens. Up next is another rolling 4-note sequence, but it's totally different than the one we just looked at. The first one was like this. Up 4, down 2, and then up 6. This one's actually just going to cycle 4 notes at a time through the whole scale. But keep in mind, once again, play everything synchronized. Synchronize your hands together and play everything tight and together, like this. It's just 4 notes at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then go to the second note and go up 4 more. And then go to the third note and do it again. Right? And then do the same thing descending. And once again, make sure you don't flub any notes in there. You want to hear every single note in that scale, and if one's a little iffy or a little flubbed, then do it again. Alright, next up's a variation of the previous idea. Instead of doing a rolling 4-note sequence, we're going to extend that into a rolling 6-note sequence, and I'm a big fan of this particular idea. And just to recap, the previous example was like this. Right, 4 notes at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. This idea is 6 notes at a time. So the same thing, but do it 6 notes at a time. So slowly like this. Make sure everything's real even and clean, like don't screw anything up in there. And just move through that scale 6 notes at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then try descending. And I really like that sequence because it forces you to think. And I know a lot of players out there don't like thinking while they're playing or jamming or whatever. But it forces you to think. You have to remember what note did I end on, what note's next that I start on, and then what's the next note that I end on. So all the way through that, you have to think the whole time, which is great. Next up's a vibrato variation of that idea, and I really like practicing this. Sometimes when I first pick up a guitar, like early in the morning, and I'm starting to wake up, and my hands are kind of, asleep or whatever, and I'm trying to wake everything up, I usually run through some basic chord, kind of stretches and stuff, maybe a few basic scale, sequences, and then I play something like this. So what we're going to do now, and for whatever reason, I like to start at the top on this instead of the bottom. But we're going to basically grab the first note, and this definitely forces you to slow down. Like, you can't shred this because it's literally locking you into a slower tempo. Because we're going to grab the first note with vibrato and then descend 5 notes. And then pick up the next note in that sequence and add vibrato there, and then descend 5 more notes like this. And we had to kind of do the stop and go vibrato all the way down like that. And you can see right there, I'm just adding vibrato, descending the remaining 5 notes. And then pick up that next, note in the scale, and then descend an additional 5 notes. Right? And then the next note. And we're just slowly making our way down that scale, but adding a little bit of vibrato. And then now, flip it around the other way and ascend. It's a really good exercise. It makes you think. You're working on vibrato, finger independence, scale sequencing, kind of moving around the fretboard and on the neck too. Great exercise. Last but not least, we're going to string skip through this scale. So this is boosting the difficulty and also the dexterity required to play it. But something like this. Right? One more time. See, we're literally just playing leapfrog through the whole scale. Like this. Right? It's got a cool sound like that too, that interbolic string skipping flavor. And then practice that descending too. Really cool sequence, and it sounds really unusual. I love string skipping. That's going to wrap this episode of Scales and Tales with the Fretboard Dexterity Workout. And I don't want you to think that this is the only way to practice dexterity. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of other exercises, sequences, concepts, and workouts and stuff that you can practice that will improve your dexterity. I'm just sharing a handful of ideas, for this episode. But there's tons of stuff out there you can use to practice, finger independence and build strength and, ability on the fretboard for sure. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Net Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.